We're off. Hello, my friend.
Oh, hello there. Happy Thursday. How are you today?
Well, I'm pretty good on this Thursday, not our usual Wednesday, but happy to be here with you. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I can't believe we're talking about the end of August. Like something about it's like summer came and went, and we've all just been staying the same. Yeah, it's an odd kind of an odd feeling of, being like the kid that didn't get a summer vacation.
Right. Well,
Remember?
I know it was never announced publicly that we would be through this by July, but I just thought that we would be through this by July, and here we are at the end of August.
Exactly. Remembering back to March, really when
Yes.
we were sort of like thinking, okay, yeah, so that's life right now, life in quarantine. And,
Well,
I know,
Julie, remembering back to March, and you and I started Poetry and Sound, wanting to find a way to be connected during this time. And, we took the opportunity to explore our love of poetry and our love of sound. And we have, really discovered some wonderful, curious, thoughtful, interesting poets. So, the longer this goes on, the more poets I feel like we're just collecting into our hoard.
yeah, I think the fun thing, and I'm curious to know on your end, have you been writing any poetry?
Not any more than typical. How about you?
I have kind of had this really kind of fun brush with some words kind of coming out of me, and the next thing you know, I've sort of put together a poem. And so what will be interesting is to kind of fire up the courage to decide when it's time to share. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to extend that invitation that when it feels like the right time, and I know our folks who listen in um, are ready to hear some of your words.
Wow, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to feel like, okay, this one's ready to share. Like
Yay.
bring a little baby into the world.
Well, that seems to be one of our themes of is the poem ready to share? Because not once, but several times you and I have started on the path of one particular poem that we wanted to share, and we find ourselves veering on another path, but following that soul path to the poem that was really ready to be shared and heard.
Right.
So I feel like that has happened again this week. Um, I was reading a new book, and the author mentioned a poem by a particular poet, both of which were new to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
really liked this author's connection to this poem. So I really wanted to find out more about this poem and this poet. Well, for circumstances that I'll get into at another time, it was not easy to find this poem. Truth be told, I haven't gotten to it yet. But
Okay.
in my search for this poem, I came across another poem. And as I was researching this poet, I started belly laughing when I realized here we go on our thread of themes again.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes. So the poet is Christine Valters Paintner. Are you familiar?
I am not.
Well, let me share a little bit about this amazing woman.
All
She is the online abbess of Abbey of the Arts. which is a virtual monastery without walls, offering a variety of classes in contemplative practice and creative expression. She's also the author of 12 books on spirituality, contemplative practice, and creative expression.
I'm in love already.
Yeah, well, hold on, sister. Hold on. Um, so she had she identifies herself as having three identities. One is a poet, one is a hermit, and one is a mystic.
Mhm.
I know. So, a little bit about herself. She grew up in New York City, and she says that one of her favorite places was a place called the Cloisters, which is a branch of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in northern Manhattan. This is a reproductive of a medieval monastery with cloistered garden, unicorn tapestries, glorious arches, and a stunning view of the Hudson River. So she says it was this aesthetic dimension of monastic life that captured her imagination long before she understood anything of its religious side. And on the religious side, she says her spiritual roots are in Catholicism with a special love for the sacramental imagination, mystical love, and a commitment to radical justice.
Mhm.
She and her husband um, are pilgrims. So in the spring of 2012, she and her husband sold everything they owned in Seattle, Washington, where they had lived for 9 years. They sold their home, their car, books, and most of their belongings to set off on a grand adventure and live overseas. So their first pilgrimage brought them to Vienna, Austria for 6 months. They then moved to Galway
Mhm.
on the west coast of Ireland. It's the land where monasteries were once thriving and integral parts of the community, which is where they still live. So I read this and thought, oh, your grand adventures immediately took you where you belong.
Mhm.
So they have fallen in love with the wisdom of Celtic monasticism and the desert tradition, which has influenced Irish monks. And it is from this place of the sacred edge, that she continues to serve the Abbey through online programs. But listen to this, my friend Julie. Later in life, while she was studying Christian spirituality in graduate school, she fell in love with the great 12th century Benedictine abbess Hildegard of Bingen.
Wow.
She was, and these are her words, she was smitten with Hildegard's creative breadth and outpouring, her love of music and poetic writing. She wanted to know more about what shaped and inspired her soul, which led her to the Benedictine path. I read Hildegard and I thought, here is that thread that keeps pulling us and pulling us.
Mhm.
I'm going to add the link to this Abbey of the Arts because she offers so many what seem to be wonderful classes that you can take on demand, and then online retreats that you take live. Um,
Oh,
they sound wonderful. I'm ready to get started with some of them.
lovely. As a side note, Hildegard was an amazing artist. And I don't know if you've seen any of her mandala work and any of her sort of
Oh.
imagining of the evolution of life. They are the most beautiful
Mm,
illustrations. Yeah.
lovely.
Mm-hmm.
So, the poem that led me to Christine Valters Paintner is one of her poems called Wild. And in it, I found another theme from when women were birds. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, here we are again. So, Wild. The night I was born, a riot of starlight broke out. Moon shimmered like the ripple of egret's wings, constellation Lupus howling, and Ursa Minor growling to welcome the arrival of animal being. The sun trapezes 10,000 times across the pale blue sky. While I learned manners and the rigid confines of politeness, learned to speak quietly and hold back. Magpies soar overhead, igniting a dim memory that I was once like this, feathered muscles rising and falling, grateful for horizon and emptiness. Or standing by the sea's roar, I longed to rush out into the wild waves to see where I would be washed ashore or if I might finally grow fins. When the end of my life arrives like a whispered crescendo, I want you to be able to say, late one evening you saw me draped in fire glow and could just make out my whiskers quivering. That you couldn't see my fur in night's embrace, but you heard it brushing against the needles of Scots pine, my dark eyes scanning the forest, seeking to return home again.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yep, a kindred spirit right there, I'd say.
Hmm. I just love this connection to nature, to animals, and bringing us back to who we were before we learned manners and the rigid confines of politeness.
Mhm. Yeah, amen to that.
Hmm.
I think as women in particular, there's a certain part in our development as little girls where it's okay, and then all of a sudden it's like age 10 seems to be the age where all of a sudden you could go a couple of, two paths sort of thing. And,
Hmm.
um, you know, then we get to a certain age again where we like reclaim it again. We have another chance. Um,
It's that
I was
reclaiming.
watching a video today about Ursula Le Guin, the writer who died at like 89, but she came up through. I want to say she was born in the late 1920s,
Hmm.
and so she is known as a science fiction phenom. That's really her genre with science fiction. And so she talks about that same sort of, she followed a very traditional path. So that by the time she was, raising children, the women's movement was sort of alive and well. And she was home with little kids and sort of on the fringe of the women's movement and didn't really claim the women's movement as being like hers for her. And then she got into her like late 50s and realized, wait a minute, like, yeah. And by then her writing was just like prolific. She was just putting out book after book after book, and she started just being a runaway
Hmm.
hit. But that's when she really stepped into her feminism and and like reclaimed that wild aspect of herself and didn't follow the rules anymore that the boys club told her she needed to follow as a writer. So I just love
Yeah.
more and more of those stories, especially as we're getting older.
Reclaiming, reclaiming of our wild soul.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I remember a few years ago, I was practicing um, large amounts of self judgment over why did it take me so long? And then I realize, you reclaim it at the moment that's right for you. That if you try to reclaim anytime sooner, it doesn't take. So,
Mm-hmm.
that ounce of self-compassion, that when the path opens up for you is when you're ready to travel down that path. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed our themes of reclaiming our soul self, our wild soul self,
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming who we were before we were domesticated and we were taught manners and certain ways to speak and certain ways to move in the world.
Mm-hmm. I
Mm-hmm.
love what she says about three aspects. Was that the right way she formed it? There was three aspects to her life.
Mm-hmm.
So this might put you on the spot, but I'm curious to know if you were to be asked that question, you come up with kind of three.
I've kind of been thinking about it. I'm not sure if it answers your question, but I've been thinking about the original self that showed up in the world
Mm-hmm.
from, before day one. And then that self I became as I acclimated to the world around me, trying to find how I fit in,
Mm-hmm.
because feeling like the way I showed up in the world didn't quite fit the narrative of people around me. So then I spent a good number of years, just trying to find a way to fit in, even though I don't think I ever fully fit in. And then have spent the last few years trying to shed those years of trying to fit in and reclaiming who was that soul that showed up in the world the first time. Um, that's who I want to go back. It's not a reinventing of myself. It's a reconnecting to myself.
I like that. Yeah, that's grace. Yeah.
Hmm.
When you get to that place where you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going back and being loving kindness to myself at that age,
Yes.
collecting
Yeah.
that. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How about you? I'm going to put you on the spot. What are your three
Well,
phases?
one of the words that I have recently reclaimed in a positive way is the word crone. Are you familiar with that word?
Yes.
So, you know, to me, at this stage in my life, the crone is the wise woman, you know, and I don't know that I'm there to take that claim yet for myself, but I'm like really like excited about getting there, getting to that
Yes.
of claiming that for myself.
Yes.
So it's one of those words that was manipulated by the patriarchy and turned into something not desirable. And
Right.
yet, for a woman who has lived lifetimes in this lifetime, getting to that status is the
Yes.
goal. Yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
it?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that word. Um, I also like the word spiritual warrior
Yeah.
because for me, that word is really full bodied to be sort of rebellious against religion on some level that is structured and maybe not even yours to carry, or
Mm-hmm.
that same thing of how do I fit into this world of religion that has been very limiting for, women in
Right.
particular. And yet that has never tamped down my desire for spirituality and to
Right.
recognize that I'm a spiritual being having this human experience. And you had mentioned something about the poet that we're talking about, loving ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, it's the same thing. I mean, growing up as a Catholic girl, or raised Catholic, uh, spending a lot of time at Mass and going to Catholic school, there is nothing more beautiful than a priest who really knows how to put on like really share the sacraments of the ritual of mass. That is
Mhm.
like to me great theater, and somebody who can do that and really command the space and go through the readings and just the candlelight and the scents and all that, like, still is like something I, even though I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, it's something I still absolutely can appreciate the beauty of. And what I would love to see, and I don't know if it will happen in my lifetime, is a return of the feminine who can truly be in that role within
Right.
the Catholic Church. I've been to churches where women lead the service, but I still would love to see that break through that big barrier. Yeah.
I hear you because when it came time to leave the Catholic Church, that was one of the things that I struggled with was the ritual
Mm-hmm.
that went on in the church and how grounding the rituals were and are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, yeah. So bringing rituals into our everyday life. I love the crone. I love, and I'm sorry that it has gotten such a bad rap.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, patriarchy. But yeah, let's reclaim the crone.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, the coolest women I know are always in their 60s or older. Like, so yeah, I that gives me great hope. It's something like getting to a place in life where you've lived enough and you've had enough of the hardships as well as the joys.
Yeah.
You just sort of cut through the stuff that used to be limiting to you. You just sort of, I don't know. I mean, and it doesn't, it's not true for all women. You can't, paint a brush, use a brush to paint that. But the women that I know that have kind of lived through it, done the work, let go of the baggage, whatever,
Hmm.
those are my role models. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I can appreciate this poet, her identities as a poet, a hermit, and a mystic.
Mm-hmm.
And the contemplative practices of all of those.
Mm-hmm.
So spending time on the west coast of Ireland um, in solitude feels very refreshing and allows space to really connect with that soul space, the soul
I
self.
wonder if Owen and Molly know her.
I'm going to let you email them and ask them.
Okay, I will.
Do you know that American who runs the Abbey down there?
Exactly. Tell her hi from Julie and Susan.
Yep. Well, I'm anxious to explore some of her offerings, and maybe we can do an offering together and we can share about it here.
Yeah, that would be really fun. I can't wait to learn more about her. I'm really intrigued. The hermit and the mystic. Those are
Hmm.
great archetypes. I
Aren't
just,
they?
yeah, I just love
Yeah.
imagining what it would be like to be bold enough to sell your worldly possessions and to really sort of launch into being a traveler, kind of,
Hmm.
I'm going to just really see where this leads me and trust that I'm being guided. I love that.
Being a seeker, selling your possessions, giving up your life,
Yeah, a
and
true
being a
pilgrim
seeker.
experience. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing this poem with me.
Oh gosh, thank you for bringing it forward. I'm
Hmm.
I'm really delighted. Yeah.
Well, I am excited to see where the rabbit hole takes you. So until we meet again, have a
All
lovely week.
right, you too, my friend.
All right.
Stay dry there in Texas.
Yeah, our part of Texas, we stayed dry. So
Yeah,
just sending lots of good thoughts to other parts of Texas and Louisiana that really got hit.
yes, we did. That's right.
Okay, I'll
All
see
right,
you
my
soon.
friend. Bye.